strange. There's usually a video that plays there. Hello and welcome in to the most accurate podcast here at 4 for 4 Fantasy Football. I'll have to talk with the video that's supposed to play in the intro. It is Friday, heading into week 6, which is way too far into the season based on how long it's been since the season started, according to my mind, but apparently that's the truth. John Paulson is here with me on this lovely Friday. John, how are you doing at the cusp of week 6?
Doing pretty well. Caught part of the game last night, which we're going to discuss, and I just want to give my well wishes to anyone who took the Eagles in their survivor pool, because I felt the pain last week with the Rams on Thursday night and also the Cardinals on Sunday. So my condolences to those survivor pool Eagles managers, I guess you call them, contestants, that had to witness that whole thing.
I was about to respond to the beginning of your statement with a piece of advice, and then I realized that advice would apply to you last week, but I'm going to do it anyways, which is I would almost never take a divisional Thursday night football game in a survivor pool, no matter who the teams are, because this is just what happens. What happened, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. The Giants beat down the Eagles 34-17. I will say it looked much closer than that for the beginning, for the first maybe half or so. And it was much closer than that for the first half or so, scoreboard wise. And then it just fell apart. And I think the main culprit for the falling apart is the Eagles and what is going on with Philly. So we'll get to the Giants, and there's a lot of great stuff there. But what is going on with Philly? I don't know, John, if you have an opinion. A.J. Brown actually had a decent game finally, 6 for 80, which is really just decent. Like, by his standards, that's nowhere near his ceiling. Dallas Goedert had a great game, but then everybody else was very ho-hum. Jalen Hurts ended up with 283 yards because they were playing from behind for so long, but one passing TD, one interception, and of course, one rushing TD makes his fantasy day good. And then the big question and concern is Saquon Barkley, who started the game. I don't know if you saw the front half or the back half. Okay. Started the game unironically with 31 yards on the first 2 carries. It looks like he was going to go for 400 yards on the day. And then the entire rest of the game, he ended up with 12 for 58. So that's 10 for 27, I believe, by my math. What's going on here, John?
I watched until about halftime, and I was kind of checking the score, and I saw that Cam Scadaboo was going nuts. I was texting with a friend about that, who picked him up after I said, make sure you grab Scadaboo once the Tyrone Tracy injury hit. So we were celebrating. And, that start to that game really looked like it would be of a huge Barkley game. And, he was motivated to play against his old team. And it's kind of shocking to look at the box score and see he only had 58 yards after that start he had. I think overall the issue here is they lost a turnover battle. It looks like it was 2-0, right? Fumble and a interception. I don't see anything for the Giants in terms of turnovers. So that sets you back. And defensively, you have a rookie quarterback throwing 7.8 yards per attempt. It's very efficient. You have Cam Scadaboo rushing for 5.2 yards per carry. Jackson Dart, 4.5. As a team, 4.4 yards per carry. So effective there as well. So I just think defensively there's some issues. Offensively, looking at their numbers, they probably should have scored more than 17 points. So it is interesting, with 283 yards passing, 73 yards rushing, there should be some opportunities there. Goddard has been sort of a revelation, and we did sort of get a clue to that. I'm pretty sure I put him in as in the target table and strategy, because he mentioned in the summer that he was really excited with the way that the offense was going to feature him, or get him the ball more, and it's happening. 11 targets, just kind of mind-boggling that he is leading maybe in one game or something, but getting this many targets consistently with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith on the field. Signs of life though from AJ Brown. I will say 6 for 80,
Yeah.
9 targets. He's not doing what we want him to do yet, but that's 14 PPR points. That's 11 half PPR. That's decent. That's a kind of a moderate AJ Brown game. Too bad it's probably his best game of the year. But once you get Hurts into 280 yards passing, there's going to be some fantasy stars in the receiving game.
Yeah, to your point about the turnovers, by the way, the Eagles were driving on a drive that would have, if they scored a touchdown, brought them within 3 points in the fourth quarter. And then there was an interception that the Giants returned almost the entire length of the field. And that was basically the dagger in the entire game. So it was a little bit closer than this for most of the game. And then it ended up being wild. On the other side of the ball, Jackson Dart looked good. I don't know if he even looked quite as good as the broadcast seemed to believe. They are really, really in on Jackson Dart. In fairness, I like him a lot too. But he just looked very solid. Like, he hasn't made a lot of mistakes. He was 17 of 25 for 195 and a touchdown. He is 58 and a touchdown on the ground. He is unironically looking like one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL right now. It's largely on scrambles, so you're not necessarily like getting the Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson design run stuff as much. But from a scramble perspective, he's put up 50-plus yards in each of his first 3 games. I believe they said on the broadcast, he's only the third QB to do that ever as a rookie besides Hurts and Lamar Jackson, funnily enough. So I wonder how high that puts him for you in your rest of season QB rankings. This is obviously a tough matchup, and he was still good for fantasy because of that rushing. And then elsewhere on the team, like you said, Scadaboo was unbelievable, scored 3 touchdowns, didn't quite hit 100 yards. He got to 98. Seemed to get much better as the game went on, which makes a lot of sense for his style of running. And then in the receiving game, Wan'Dale Robinson was very good. Looks like he will be a big part of the who's going to step up for Malik Neighbors. And Lil Jordan Humphrey had 8 targets, a couple of big catches with Darius Slayton out. So I wonder if you have any interest in him moving forward.
Yeah, Dart was not ranked terribly high this week because the Eagles were a bad matchup for quarterbacks, and you just, as a rookie, you wonder. But he does have that rushing floor. I did see a couple of design runs for him. It'd be interesting to look at his first few games here and see how many design runs he's having and how many scrambles he's having, because that will sort of underscore or drive maybe his rest of season value, because if we know that they're planning these runs for him and that this is part of the game plan, that's going to boost his floor and his fantasy stock in general. But this is a big game for him fantasy wise, to produce this many fantasy points on a short week against the defending champs and a pretty good defense. Backfield, Scadaboo. I'm so mad at Jordan Renan, the beat writer, and I have nothing personal against him, but I'm really mad now because I was in on Scadaboo in the summer. Looking at all the research I did post draft, his rushing grades at PFF, seeing him play at Arizona State, I just felt like he was the better running back. Nothing against Tyrone Tracy. He had a nice stretch down the stretch last year, and it just seemed like Scadaboo was the more versatile, talented back coming in. He was a good pass catcher, and he had the second highest rushing grade after Ashton Genty in this year's draft class. So I figured at some point he was going to win this job, and I had him projected higher. I don't know where I landed on him at the end of draft rankings, because Jordan Renan came out and said, absolutely, Tyrone Tracy is the RB1. He's entrenched, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, Scadaboo was dealing with a hamstring injury. So I was like, all right, I can't target him as heavily, or I don't want to overload our subscribers on him. So I don't know how many of our 4for4 subscribers have Cam Scadaboo. I hope plenty, because he is emerging there as the RB1 and is locked in. Looks like he had 19 carries to Tyrone Tracy's 4, Devin Singletary's 3. Looked really great doing it. Little Jordan Humphrey is, just to touch on him, like, could be a possible with Slayton sideline, could be an interesting deep dart throw, desperation dart throw type. He reminds me of like Kendrick Bourne, where he just comes off the practice squad and gets 70, 80% of the snaps and just produces. Like he does seem like he has bounced around a lot, can't make an active roster unless there's injuries, but when he does, he's like this production machine. So you would think that it would be Jalen Hyatt's time, but he, 3 catches, 17 yards on 5 targets for, a pretty high draft pick. And then Theo Johnson, he had the 2 touchdowns last week. We're hoping for a sneaky start type line for him, but he only had a 2 for 27 on 4 targets. So time to pump the brakes maybe a little bit on Theo.
Yeah. It's worth noting on the running back split front, because this was Tyrone Tracy's first game back. You could say, well, maybe he'll get worked back in a little bit more and it'll end up being more of a split. This will sound narrative-y, but I really don't think that it is. And it was one of the broadcast's number one things they were talking about last night. The energy and the excitement that Cam Scadaboo and Jackson Dart bring to this team matter, in my opinion, to the degree where it doesn't matter if Tyrone Tracy is averaging 0.4 yards per carry more or something like that. That's not even a real stat. I'm just saying, if Tyrone Tracy were playing well or even a little bit better, this team seems to be coming to life around these 2 rookies in a way that they have not in recent memory. And I think that matters. Everyone on the sideline on this team is excited. Scadaboo's going around headbutting everybody in existence. I'm surprised he's not headbutting coaches. Like, I think that this matters, and they love having him and Dart running this show now. And I think it will be their show for a long time, certainly this year. Okay, well, fun game. We will move on to the rest of the week because there's a lot to talk about, as usual. Quick reminder, there will be Q&A at the end of the show. If you would like to drop some questions in chat, John and I will get to answers after news and matchups. So drop those in there. If you've got simple start-sit questions, this guy or this guy, go check out John's rankings on 444.com. That is the easiest and quickest way to answer those. And we will most likely answer other questions in the chat that are a little more general and top tier. Okay, let's get into the news. Thankfully, it feels like there's a little less this week than there was last week, but there are some big things to cover. First thing, it's the biggest NFL news. TBD how big it is for fantasy, but Joe Flacco was traded to the Bengals. Anybody who has Jamar Chase or T. Higgins on their roster, at the very least, got a jolt of hope out of this. But the question is, John, should they really have any hope? And does this make an actual difference in Cincinnati? He has been immediately named the starter over Jake Browning.
You would like to think it would. I mean, if you're trying to be optimistic and you're looking for reasons for hope, quarterback change there, or at least quarterback options there, because now they can do what they feel is best between 2 guys that are kind of gunslinger type guys who can, like, we've seen them both support fantasy receivers, fantasy wise, or just fantasy receivers in general, real world receivers, passing games in general, with 250, 260, 270 yards passing, a couple touchdowns. We've in recent years. Browning had a good run last year or year before as the starter, filling in fantasy wise, threw a lot of interceptions, but a lot of yardage. And I think Flacco is probably going to do the same thing. Flacco just doesn't really care at this point in terms of his interceptions. He's throwing the ball. He's kind of a gunslinger. So he didn't look that great or that same level of, what we've seen in the year prior or the year prior to that, when he's done some spot starts and he's been chucking the ball downfield at Cleveland. Had some moments with Cedric Tillman, very few with Jerry Jeudy, a bit with the tight ends, but wasn't having these 250, 270 yard games consistently. And some of that had to do with pass protection and his lack of mobility. So the question is are the Bengals any better at protecting him and giving him time? Because I think if you give him time, he's competent in delivering the ball down to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now he might throw some picks, but he can at least get some targets on them and give them chances to make plays. And that's what you're looking for right now with Joe Burrow out, if you are a manager that has Chase or T. Higgins. So I think just change is probably good given what we've seen recently. And, it's hopeful. And now they can at least play the two off each other and maybe manufacture some production if one of them can get in there and do something for them.
I think the main hope here is that from a chicken and egg perspective, if you will, Flacco was so bad in Cleveland because he didn't really have anyone great to throw to, and having Chase and Higgins will now make up for that, and so he'll be better. Because if that's not the case, oh my goodness, was Joe Flacco bad this year? Like, the only quarterbacks worse were Jake Browning and Cam Ward, and depending on what stat you look at, Flacco was worse than Browning and or Ward. So I had Jamar Chase, I will just say before we move on, as a sell in my 4for4 trade column this week because of this hope. If you can find someone who thinks that Flacco is going to be incredible for Chase, I would try to sell him at a top 5 wide receiver price. I'm not saying sell cheap. And in fact, he's coming off a great game, so sell him at that price. But I just don't think that this Joe Flacco is going to be the old Joe Flacco. John mentioned if he can get some support from the O-line, that'll help his old immobile self to find the receivers. Spoiler alert, this O-line is just as bad as Cleveland's. So it could get real messy real fast. See what you can get would be my take there. The other big news, this one's much less encouraging, or there's no hope in it, is Omarion Hampton, who got injured in the game last week, but it didn't seem like that much. But then it quickly came out that he is going to hit IR. So he is out for a month. In his stead, the talk of the week, last week it was Michael Carter versus Emari Demercado in fantasy Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever you use. This week it is Hassan Haskins or Kimani Vidal, which has to be the most obscure running back debate we've had in the fantasy streets for quite some time. John, do you have a front runner, or is this just a no idea or committee situation for you for the next 4 weeks?
It's kind of a wait and see. Vidal played ahead of Haskins, I think, last year when there was some touches available, and he was ahead of when Gus Johnson went down, playing behind J.K. Dobbins. But Vidal was not on the team, and Haskins was on the team to start the season. So in that, if I remember correctly, in that respect, the team picked Haskins over Vidal. Haskins played for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, so there's that kind of built-in like favoritism or rapport or relationship. I've seen quotes that both players are the next man up, like at different times from Harbaugh. Apparently, I'm just trying to do research on this situation. So right now, I have them both ranked in the 30s. They both could deliver this week. I don't have high confidence in either seeing more than 10 touches. We just don't know at this point which one they're going to favor or which one's going to be the lead back. I will say athletically, Vidal profiles as the better player. That's athletically. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a better running back, but that means that if they both hit the same hole, he should be better positioned to get more yards, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I know Vidal was a kind of a hot name a year or two ago in the draft streets. And then that sort of has faded. But now we're back. Everything is cyclical.
Yep.
And now we're, everything old is new again. With Vidal now in a position perhaps to be the RB1, but it might be Haskins as well. So it's a long way of saying I don't know. I've got them ranked both as RB3s. And, unless we get some clarity on from the coaches or, through the beat writers, I just don't have a lot of confidence in either player right now. Yeah.
The real tough thing here is that each of them has strengths that the other doesn't really have, and that make them a better quote unquote fantasy choice. Vidal, probably the better pass catcher, definitely the more explosive player, as John said. But Haskins maybe more likely to see more carries, and very likely, I would think, to see the goal line carries. So if they get down to the 2 or the 1 and they score a rushing touchdown, it feels like it would probably be Haskins. So it is such a toss-up here. There's a really, really good matchup this week against the Dolphins, which makes the Omarion Hampton injury even more sad. But it also means that if you picked one of these guys up and you're really, really desperate, it's not impossible you could stream play one or both. I mean, not both in the same lineup, but both could be playable in fantasy lineups potentially. Elsewhere, Alvin Kamara is a little banged up with an ankle injury, but also worth simply noting, and I wanted to get your thoughts, John, that Kendre Miller has slowly ramped up in snaps and carries and actually out-carried and outperformed Alvin Kamara last week. Obviously, Kendre Miller, sort of similar to the Kamani Vidal thing, had some fantasy draft hoopla back in the day. Then he could not stay healthy whatsoever, and the coaching staff hated his guts for it. This is the new coaching staff. This is the new team, and Kendre Miller seems to be healthy. Do you have a belief or an expectation for these two moving forward?
Yeah, Kendre Miller is a player. I'm in some deep leagues, so he was one that was sort of going overlooked as one of the attrition backs that were pretty high value. That if there was an injury ahead of them, could see a lot of touches. And Alvin Kamara is not the most durable running back either. He's also older, so I have him. I have Kendre Miller in a couple teams, and it's getting to the point where he's kind of a useful flex type. He had 11 touches last week, 41 yards rushing, 8 yards receiving, playing not huge snaps, but he's almost to 40% now as of last week. Had the good week 4 where he had 11 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown against the Bills. So he's getting to be where, useful. And if you have a spot on the bench and he's available on the waiver wire, I think he's a high level attrition contingency pick right now, because we also are dealing with, getting Miller or getting Kamara kind of dinged up. So 10 and 11 carries the last 2 weeks. I think we're getting into RB3 flex type spot start type territory.
Yeah, I would imagine Tyler Algier is probably the most rostered and most rosterable attrition back so far this year. If Kendre Miller even still fits in that category, he would be number 1 now for me. And I think I agree with John, is flexible. So he should be rostered everywhere. Briefly on the Cardinals situation that I briefly referenced earlier, just the fallout from last week. Michael Carter had the vast majority of the work. Well, compared to the other two, he didn't have the vast majority of snaps just in terms of 60, 70%. I believe it was around 49%. He did have the vast majority of carries with 18. Amari DeMarcado saw 3. Zonovan Bam Knight saw just 4. DeMarcado broke one of his for 71 yards and then dropped the football at the goal line. How? Why? No one knows the answer. It's the most baffling thing in football, why these guys keep doing this. Jonathan Gannon was very upset about it. So upset that he got fined $100,000 for basically hitting DeMarcado. So wild situation. But do you believe that for the weeks Benson is gone, this will basically be the breakdown? Or was this a 1 week thing and it could change up? And B, in a very, very difficult, much more difficult matchup than last week, this week against I wouldn't say very difficult, it's against the Colts, but it's much more difficult than the matchup against the Titans, where the Cardinals led all game. Do you feel confident starting Carter if you do believe he's the clear lead guy?
I feel relatively confident that the Cardinals want Michael Carter to be the lead guy. This is a really frustrating situation, not because I took the Cardinals in the survivor pool and I was unceremoniously eliminated on this crazy ass game.
Wild.
Watching it was so frustrating, and I'm sitting there, okay, fine. I was wrong about Michael Carter, DeMarcado, because my argument for DeMarcado, I don't know why the Cardinals are doing what they're doing. He heading into the game, he averaged 6 yards per carry, 4.72 yards per carry on 50-something first and second down carries. Very productive running back. Also good in the passing game. 215 pounds, so it's not like he's like some little scat back or something and can't handle the load. They didn't give him a chance, and they had him ahead of Michael Carter all summer and into the season, and then decided, they see him every day. They know who he is, his personality. Maybe this, tossing the ball at the goal line is something that they thought he might do something. They may not trust him,
Yeah.
and maybe that might be the
Mhm.
issue, because then you elevate Michael Carter, who's fine, but he's just kind of a journeyman 4 yards per carry type guy. But he's versatile. But then they feed him 18 carries for 51 yards. He rushes for 2.8 yards per carry. They
Not good.
give Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, more carries than DeMercado, who's been active every week behind Connor and then Benson. He rushes for 11 yards on 4 carries, has a catch. DeMercado's not even targeted, and I think it was on his second touch. He rips off a 72-yard run. The guy has 4.49 speed. He has a top 20 rushing grade from 2023 and 2024. As I mentioned, a capable pass catcher. He's been the third down back. Caught a touchdown the previous week when we thought Benson was going to be the workhorse. Like they think enough of him to not use Benson late in the game the previous week. So this is just mind-boggling to me. I think they win this game if he gets 15 touches, and they're moving on with the W. But here we are. All that to say, and I try to be brief with these things, but this one I had to go off on the
Yeah.
Cardinals. I don't know what they're doing. The assumption of logical coaching absolutely applies to the Cardinals. You can't assume that they're going to do what they probably should do based on. I guess I'm a layman when it comes to this, but I've watched enough football to know when a running back's good. Anyway, yes, you can start Michael Carter because the Cardinals are stubborn. I don't think DeMercado like fumbling the ball at the goal line is going to earn him any more playing time
No.
unless they feel bad for him, or unless they're like, Jesus, what a run that was. Like, we got to give this guy more touches. Maybe they do that. I don't know. Maybe they're getting criticized from enough about DeMercado's usage that they decide they're going to give him a shot. But in the meantime, we have 23 touches for Michael Carter. He's probably going to see at least 15 to 17 touches this week. And it's not a great matchup, but a lot of guys have to start him this week, or a lot of fantasy managers have to start him this week.
Yeah. I think you're going to be stuck with that move mostly, especially if you picked him up and for the attrition reasons that he is getting these carries. Incidentally, by the way, the assumption of logical coaching, which we try to do in general as fantasy players, much less useful when the coaches are garbage. And sorry, but Jonathan Gannon is terrible. Drew Petzing is terrible. This coaching staff is so bad. You only lose games like that, like the Cardinals lost, to teams like that, the Titans, who are among the worst in the league, when you have bad coaches, in my opinion. That's just, DeMarcado shouldn't have fumbled that ball, but they still should have won the game. So, yeah, tough. We'll try to assume good things about coaches, but it's hard to do with this one. One other interesting bit of news not related to injury, Cameron Wolfe, one of the NFL's like insider reporter type guys, says that the Jaguars see Travis Hunter as unlocked after last week. He had a couple nice downfield targets, one huge jump ball catch that was incredible, and might see more downfield receiving work moving forward. Do you believe this? Do you care? Are you holding him with some excitement moving forward?
I'm holding him because I'm a believer in his talent. I know Matt Harmon absolutely loves him. The prospect profile was the rare all green route tree. So he is like an elite route runner. So those guys I just hold on to. I find a spot in my bench, and it's hurting right now. But you don't cut those guys, because especially rookies, because we've seen so many times where second half of the season, rookie receivers start to go off. I was hoping for I think we all were hoping for a more established role. We were hoping for Trevor Lawrence to, throw the ball better than he has. And we were hoping for that 80% snap rate that Liam Cohen sort of threw out there as his target for Hunter in an interview, which is what made me move him up my draft board a bit, knowing that he was going to be basically a full-time player. That just hasn't happened. So once we start to see that, I think you're going to see the targets rise. You're going to see the talent start to rise, and he's going to start producing. It's been pretty sad so far, but I'm still definitely going to hold out hope, and I probably will for years with the all green route tree over at Reception Perception, because those all green route trees tend to pay off.
Yeah, he should not be on a waiver wire. So go check yours, because if he is there, you should pick him up. Almost certainly. Obviously, your bench, who's on your bench matters, but I think there is hope for him over the course of the season. Rookies tend to get better over the course of the season, regardless. In New England, Antonio Gibson, why is he in the news in our news section? Well, because of what he has contributed to in New England, which is TreVeyon Henderson not getting the ball. He tore his ACL last week, unfortunately, and Ramondre Stevenson fumbled the ball again. Now, with both those things happening, we still didn't see a full changing of the guard to TreVeyon Henderson. So the real question here for you, John, is, are we ever going to? Is there ever going to be enough reason? We return to the assumption of logical coaching here, for the Patriots to go to TreVeyon Henderson, who they drafted in the high end of the second round and who looks very, very good? Or is this going to be a really annoying, stupid committee all year long?
Well, I think the thing that's maybe lost in this question, and it's not an indictment of your question, but the Antonio Gibson being removed from the equation might boost both players, and certainly boost both players' floors in theory, because there's just more touches available. I don't see anybody on the roster that they're going to just elevate. They got Joshua Corbin, Terrell Jennings on the practice squad right now. I think that's all the running backs that they have. So this very likely to me is now a two-man committee. And that makes both these guys more startable, because you have those handful of touches that Gibson was getting that now they're going to be split between the two of them. Now the fumble thing is the wild card, right? It's like if it was Belichick coaching, Ramondre would be bench probably, just knowing his distaste for turnovers. We thought we were going to see this earlier in the season. They came out and said it's not going to affect his playing time, and they stuck with that. I don't think Ramondre really suffered in terms of his playing time. They know they're going to need both players. They know that TreVeyon Henderson is not a workhorse back. So I think they're pretty satisfied with this lead back role for Ramondre right now, unless Henderson really starts to outplay him. They might give Henderson an extra series or two on top of the extra series he might get because of the Gibson injury, due to the turnovers that Stevenson, if they don't trust him, if they start to lose trust in him, and they just basically say, we can't have this guy in certain situations because he fumbles. So there is, I think, a little bit of upside from that standpoint as well. But until we start seeing it in the snap shares and the touch shares, I'm just going to continue to rank them with Stevenson slightly ahead and slightly more playable.
Largely speaking, Henderson has not been playable based off the production he's had. Does this get him close to playable for you, or is he still a hold and wait, hold on the bench?
I mean, I think, I've got him at 31 this week, so there's going to be teams that are going to need to roll him out there. It's not a terrible matchup against the Saints. I mean, Ramondre's at 24, Henderson at 31, and that's basically the level of confidence I have in their touch floor, and who might get the touchdown.
All righty, let's keep our fingers crossed. Some stretches of this week injury news. Chris Godwin is not expected to play with a fibula injury. This is somewhat surprising. Obviously, he had returned from the injuries he'd had surgery for in the offseason, and now he's back out. Oh, I mean, not officially out, but not expected to play. Mike Evans is still out, which means Emeka Buka's ceiling might be somewhere near the moon. But do you have any interest also in Sterling Shepard, who would theoretically be the next man up this week?
Yeah, I woke up to this news. I immediately raced to my computer. I walked to my computer. I sat down. I updated the projections. I notified the Discord that they were updated as I began to write some players up for sneaky starts. I added Cade Otton, who I think is probably the most exciting beneficiary of this. He, had some really good games last year with Godwin out. He averaged 4.6 receptions for 48 yards, 0.43 touchdowns in the 7 games that Godwin missed last year. And now those are like low end tight end 1 numbers, if not better. 6.6 targets per game. We saw him have a good game, kind of a breakout game last week against Seattle. I mean, a lot of people did because that game was so crazy and there's so many fantasy points being scored. But he had 81 yards, I think, on 4 catches against the Seahawks. So that's the one where I feel confident, like you can take this guy off the waiver wire and you can feel pretty good about starting him as like a high end tight end 2, low end tight end 1. You can see in the rankings for your scoring system where we have him or where I have him. And then I think with receiver, the initial thing is like Sterling Shepard, right? It's like he's had some games this year that have been pretty good. You look at he didn't do well against Seattle though, and it was Tez Johnson that actually had 59 yards. He had 4 for 4. He caught 4 or 4 targets for 59 yards. I looked up at him a little bit. Seventh round pick, 5'10". So they're like really small at receiver right now, which I think is also a benefit for Cade Otton, who might get an extra red zone target or 2 with Mike Evans sidelined, Chris Godwin sidelined. Although Igbuka has got a ton of touchdowns already, so not necessarily going to happen. But I think if you're desperate, I mean, these are wide receiver 5 type plays. I think between the two of them, I don't feel super confident that either one will beat out the other in terms of targets or fantasy points, because Sterling Shepard ran 22 routes, Johnson ran 20. So that was very close. I don't know that there's going to be a big disparity in their snaps. And in that case, there might not be a big disparity in their fantasy points.
Incidentally, a lot of the time when these higher on the depth chart wide receivers go out, the running back benefits as well in the receiving game. And Rachaad White, who is the lead back right now with Bucky Irving hurt, is obviously an accomplished pass catcher. So he's worth looking at as well. And I really like the Cade Otton call. Okay. A few other injuries to monitor, and then we will get to the matchups. Lamar Jackson, still not practicing with this hamstring injury that took him out of the game and forced Cooper Rush in a bit ago. It's not looking good. I do not believe he will be playing. I haven't seen any practice report from today being Friday, yet, but it's not looking good. Which is not looking good for the Ravens because, whoa, it was not good under Cooper Rush last week. We had mentioned, I believe, that Rush has had some okay weeks in his career, spot starting mostly for Dak Prescott. This looks bad. And Zay Flowers is also limited, was limited yesterday with a shoulder injury. Again, haven't seen Friday's practice report. If Cooper Rush is a starter, which looks to be the case, if not Zay Flowers is in, you can give me your thoughts both ways, but is there anyone you can play in Baltimore at all? And that includes Derrick Henry, who has obviously been struggling.
Houston was a tough matchup, granted. I think we settled on Rush being able to replace most of Lamar Jackson's passing production, because he probably would, he wouldn't run at all. He didn't run at all. And he probably would be, making more pass attempts, but he only had 20. Ended up with 179 yards passing, which is not bad, 9 yards per attempt. The issue here is there's no touchdowns. There's 3 interceptions, so all these drives are getting killed. That's why the attempts were only 20. Like, if he could have kept the ball out of the Texans' hands, this might have been, obviously it would have been a different game, but it might have been a much different game also fantasy-wise. So I still, if he's still the quarterback, because I know they're talking about Snoop Huntley possibly being in, but if it's still Cooper Rush, I still feel pretty good about Zay Flowers. He did post 5 for 72 on 5 targets. The targets weren't enough, but to see, 1/4 of the target share is fine for Zay Flowers. He can give you a nice PPR game. You're also paying attention to his injury situation, and if he's limited on Friday today, then it's a little dicier. But we really can't start anyone else with any sort of confidence. I think Henry, at least you're going to get 15 carries. You're going to get the goal line carries. You might get a target or 2. But they have the running game is not rolling like it was last year at all, and I'm sure the absence of Lamar Jackson is hurting. Even though Henry, I think, was starting to falter a little bit before the Lamar Jackson, but the whole offense has been kind of just disjointed this year. So we do want Lamar back. Henry is more, typically ranked as a RB1 every week. He has slid down into the 19-20 range where, he's a high floor in terms of his touches. He's going to get some touches. He's going to get the goal line opportunities. But how many goal line opportunities are there going to be given the quarterback situation?
We are far enough into the season where people can start to consider sitting their studs. And with Derrick Henry down at 19 for you, that obviously is possible depending on who people have. Just a couple names, and you tell me where he falls in this group. Rachaad White, who we mentioned, David Montgomery, who's somewhat hit or miss this year, but mostly hit, and Ramondre Stevenson, who we talked about and believe will still be getting significant work. Is it Henry over any of those guys? Henry over all those guys?
Well, I think White is ahead of Henry. I have him at 16, Henry at 19, Montgomery at 21. So I think the Henry Montgomery decision is it's tough because you don't know what type of game flow this is going to be for the Lions. If the Lions are trailing in this one, Montgomery doesn't tend to have as good of a game as if the game script is positive. They tend to ride Gibbs more. And then Stevenson is still in like this timeshare. So I think I would go with Henry over Stevenson. It's not a good matchup for Derrick Henry, but he's Derrick Henry and he's one of the best running backs in the league. And he's capable of breaking one if there's a hole or two. And, he's going to get all the goal line work. Especially with Lamar Jackson out, he's getting all the goal line touches.
Yeah. All righty. Briefly on a few more. Kyler Murray did not practice Thursday as a foot injury. It's looking like he might not play. So if you're relying on Kyler Murray as your starting quarterback, first of all, make sure you have a streamer on hand. But does this affect Marvin Harrison's playability for you or Trey McBride's? But you can't really sit Trey McBride.
Yeah, I think it would probably downgrade their stats a bit. I don't know how much their projections a bit. I don't know how much they'll fall in the projections. Jacoby Brissett is pretty solid. Like there's quarterbacks that are backups that are like oh god, this is bad for all the fantasy people. And sometimes these guys that I like or have seen do well and have confidence in, all of a sudden are bad. Like the Browning has been kind of a debacle, although Browning did have a pretty good game last week in terms of fantasy support. I think Brissett's capable of going in there and, holding down the fort for a game or two if necessary. And, Kyler Murray we weren't starting Marvin Harrison because Kyler Murray is this prolific passer who's going to throw for 250 and 2 every game. We start Marvin Harrison because he gets the vast majority of targets outside of Trey McBride. He's got a high target floor and he's a talented player. I think Brissett can deliver the ball just as well as Murray has, and he's going to still be startable.
Brock Bowers did not practice yesterday, Thursday. He is being labeled day-to-day with a knee injury. He has reportedly struggled through injury so far this season, and it has affected his play. So I think Brock Bowers managers might honestly prefer or should prefer him to sit this week and get healthy. I will just ask you, obviously this week it doesn't matter much, but over the course of the season or looking forward, do you still have high confidence in Brock Bowers as a top 2, top 3 tight end? Would you be targeting him in trades if that's the case, or are you concerned for the rest of the year?
Well, knee injuries, right? That's what this is, I'm concerned. Yeah. And we don't know exactly what he's been playing through it. So it's probably not super serious, but I think you would like to see him sit out a game or two if you're his manager. And maybe if they do that, you start to target him in a trade because they now are at least taking the right tact with him and giving him some rest before they try to bring him back. There are quite a few streaming options this week that are nice. I mentioned Otten, Tongas, Mason Taylor, and then even getting into his own backup. Michael Mayer is going to be back. It looks like he's practicing. And he's not going to replace Brock Bowers, but he could replace 70-80% of Brock Bowers, which might win you a game. I've got him right now at 23. It's not a terribly good matchup against the Titans, who are 8th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. AJ Barner is another good streamer. I think against Jacksonville, he's got a lot of touchdowns, low targets. But for Bowers, it's like I don't know how you feel about Bowers. I loved his rookie season. I thought he was going to have a monster year. He's been saying that he's been struggling with this, and that's probably why the numbers are down. And if he can get healthy, he could have a big second half.
Yeah, I would maybe be looking to see if the manager is frustrated. The Bowers manager in your league is frustrated and willing to trade, because I do believe if he can get healthy, which this rest week, to me is a big positive in doing that. He should be one of the best tight ends in the league and in fantasy when healthy. And I do think that he has not been because of this injury. So I'd be looking to get him. I have confidence, but he should be out this week. Obviously have a backup plan. Speaking of out, the 49ers, their whole team is out. They're likely to once again be without Brock Purdy, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, or George Kittle. Some of those are still TBD officially, but that is the trend. I guess the basic question is, does that mean start Mac Jones, Kendrick Bourne, and Jake Tungus again?
Well, the last I saw on Jawan Jennings was he was back at practice on Thursday. I'm interested to see. I'm sure he was limited.
Yes.
So that's an indicator that he might play. It looks like Pearsall is going to sit. It looks like Kittle's going to sit based on the language around both those guys. I think Bourne is still startable. I'm starting him in Scott Fishbowl this week. I've got him ranked in the top 30 right now, and that's with Jennings. That's with Jennings out. If Jennings returns, I think he's probably going to replace Demarcus Robinson, given how well Bourne played last year. We mentioned on the sneaky starts yesterday with Addison that this Kendrick Bourne relationship goes back to Mac Jones's rookie season in New England. He had his best year, 800 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. And that was Mac Jones's best year as a Patriots quarterback. So maybe we should have seen this coming. I did write Kendrick Bourne up last week in sneaky starts. I didn't do a big blurb on it. I just said he's the 49er I would start if you needed a desperate play, because he has a history like little Jordan Humphrey of coming off the practice squad or coming off the street and just coming in and producing for teams whenever he gets the snaps. So I think if Jennings plays, he's probably not going to be 100%. Snaps might be somewhat limited. You're still going to have Bourne out there playing a lot with Mac Jones, who he has a nice rapport with. I think it's a pretty solid start.
All righty. Let's get into the matchups and then Q&A after that. So once again, drop your questions in there if you've got them, and we will get to them at the end of the show is when we get to them, because we have so much to talk about here. All right. Game of the week. There's a few options here. I've labeled it as the Cowboys and the Panthers. A strange game, perhaps, to label the game of the week, but 49.5 point over-under. The Cowboys defense has been tissue paper, porous, pick your analogy. Bottom 3 in AFPA against quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, and average against tight ends, which you largely just have to imagine is because they're too busy giving points away to the other 3 positions. So this is the main reason for having this game here, is to ask the question, who can you play and or stream for the Panthers? Chuba Hubbard did not practice yesterday. He is likely to miss this game, most likely to miss this game. We'll see what the Friday practice report says, which means it'll be Rico Dowdle up again at starting position. But who are you willing to play from the Panthers side of the ball in this game against this defense?
You're starting Dowdle after last week's game. I've got him at 11, RB 11. I did not have enough confidence in his lead back role to rank him that high last week. But now after seeing what they're doing, and that really stemmed from the previous game with Trevor Etienne getting like 7 touches and Dowdle only getting 10. And that was the game that Hubbard played in. So it seemed like that might be more of a committee, but Etienne came in only when Bryce Young left the game. Andy Dalton came in. So that was just an indication that they had given up, and he was the backup and Dowdle was the lead back. And that really was underscored last week. So we have lots of confidence in Dowdle running well, great matchup. it looks great. Absolutely starting him, starting Ted McMillan as well. He's wide receiver 12. Great matchup.
Woo.
I think, it's Dallas. The 32nd
Yep.
adjusted fantasy points allowed to. I would
I
even
love it.
start. If in a pinch. I would even start Bryce Young. He hasn't
Hey.
scored more than 12 points since like week 2, but the Cowboys have given up like a minimum of 24 fantasy points to quarterbacks every game this season. So you would think he would score at least 18. I would think. Other than that, it starts to get dicey. I think Jalen Coker is probably the most intriguing name if he indeed returns, and I think he's back at practice. I don't know if they've activated him off of IR yet or whatever, but he had a nice target share, nice yard share distributions last year, and if they can get him in there, he could be that number 2 option. It really hasn't happened for Xavier Legette. Obviously, Adam Thielen is gone, so they're just kind of dealing with a lot of guys, outside of McMillan. Bryson Tremaine is getting, routes. Hunter Renfro had that big game, and then it's kind of disappeared. David Moore, Jimmy Horn. These are the guys running routes for the. No offense to any of these guys, they're NFL players, but from a fantasy standpoint, Jalen Coker coming in potentially could be that number 2 option there in that passing game. And this is a great matchup. So if you're desperate and you want to roll them out there, go for it. Tommy Tremble's going to be out there running routes too. Had a pretty good game 2 weeks ago. I don't think he did much last week. But that's about it. When you're talking about the Panthers.
This should tell you how bad the Cowboys defense has been, is that these names are coming up as legitimate options. Coker practicing full yesterday and is looking like a game time call for Sunday. So if you're interested in playing him, have him on your bench and have another alternate option. I believe they play at 10 a.m., so you should be okay, unless your option is a Bronco or a Jet because they play in London. Other side of the ball, you're starting Dak, you're starting Javonte Williams, you're starting George Pickens, and you're definitely starting Jake Ferguson because the Panthers are terrible against tight ends, 30th in AFPA. They're kind of actually a little tough, quote unquote, against the other positions. The only question worth asking coming out of last week is Ryan Flournoy a thing? He popped off last week out of absolutely nowhere. I don't know what percentage of fantasy managers even knew that name. Do you have any interest in him this week or moving forward?
I only knew of him because I saw that he was next up in routes after Tolbert, and I thought that was interesting. I had Tolbert. I thought Tolbert would be the one that would step up. He had some pretty good games last year, but it was Flournoy. 9 targets, 6 catches, 114 yards. His snaps spiked from 32% in week 3 to 23% in week 4. Actually went down there against the Packers, but then spiked to 57% against the Jets. And that's with Turpin out. So we got to keep an eye on Kevontae Turpin. If Kevontae Turpin is back, which I haven't seen an update on him for today, then this is going to, kind of throw Flournoy's snaps into limbo. But I've got him ranked as like a low end wide receiver 4 or high end wide receiver 5, assuming Turpin remains out, because he is kind of that third option in the passing game. And, it's not a great matchup, but it's not a terrible one either.
Turpin is expected to be out, but we don't have any official news. So
Okay.
Keep an eye on that. Fate of the week. We don't have to talk too long about this game because it stinks. The Titans and the Raiders. It's a 40.5 point over-under. The Tennessee defense has been very tough against quarterbacks and the passing game, but they are dead last in AFPA against running backs. So please, Ashton Genty, have another one of those massive games like you did a couple of weeks ago. Can you play anyone in the passing game here?
Against the Tennessee defense. Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker are, they're wide receiver 3-4 types. It's not like, certainly not like you're not running out trying to start either one of them. But Myers, Tennessee's 15th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the receiver position, so they're kind of middle of the road. I've got Myers at 29, Tucker at 34, but that might be a tad high. Tucker had a pretty good game last week, but yeah, Genty is probably the star here. They're 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, and he's starting to come on.
On the other side of the ball, the Raiders defense, top 7 in AFP against quarterbacks and tight ends. You wonder how much of that is about teams not having to throw that much against them, but looking okay. Obviously, they have a good pass rush. Middle of the road otherwise. Do you have any hope for anyone in this Tennessee offense? They showed some sparks last week in that Cardinals game, but largely they've been sittable, or in Tony Pollard's case, fringe playable. Tyjae Spears is now back, so even that's a little iffier. Do you have any confidence here?
Yeah, Ridley is like a fringe wide receiver 3 after a really good game last week. You're hopeful that this turns into a trend and that he and Cam Ward are now on the same page, or at least that's the spark that lights the rebellion. Tennessee getting that passing game going. Iomanor is kind of fading a tad because Ridley's doing better, so we'll kind of see how that shakes out. I've got him ranked like 44th this week. So these are not guys you really want to start, but you might be in a position, given your draft, that you need to. And you are starting to get a little hopeful for Ridley. Pollard is startable. He's been getting the vast majority of the touches. They didn't like immediately work Tyjae Spears in for a big workload last week. So, you could probably count on 15 carries for Pollard.
Alrighty, let's dive into the positions. Lots of questions in the chat, so we'll try to be quick and get to what we can. At the quarterback spot, the good matchups this week, Jordan Love gets the Bengals. He hasn't been incredible for fantasy, but the Bengals have been. They're 29th in AFPA. Caleb Williams gets the Commanders, who are 27th. He has been quite good for fantasy, coming off his bye. Bo Nix gets the Jets, who are interestingly 23rd in AFPA. Bo Nix has been getting a little better. And then Matthew Stafford has low-key been amazing this year. He gets the Ravens, who are 31st in AFPA and seemingly getting more injured every week. Are all these guys streamable for you, John? And if so, how do you order them?
Yeah, Jordan Love 14th right now in points per game at 18.6, which is pretty solid. He was, he's only 4.4 behind, 0.6 behind the quarterback 10, Drake May. He was like QB 17, 18 off the board, so I think he's done a good job of outperforming his draft position. Had the one bad game against Cleveland, but otherwise 21 points in week 1. 21 points in week 2, 26 points in week 4. As you mentioned, Caleb Williams, QB 7 on the year, points per game. And then Stafford, QB 9 points per game. He's been excellent. And I think the issue with Stafford heading in, not only that he doesn't run, but he had that back injury this summer. And that was like, back injuries for this guy his age, like, oh man, where is this headed? He's been excellent. I think these guys are all startable that you mentioned, given the matchups, and they're all, I believe, ranked in the top 13. I've got Stafford at 13, Nix at 12, and I might move Stafford up a spot or two ahead of maybe Daniel Jones, because this is a really tasty matchup against Baltimore.
Love it. On the bad side, Justin Fields is facing the Denver Broncos, who are 5th in AFPA and are obviously very, very, very strong with an extremely talented secondary. Now, Fields is a running quarterback, so maybe that makes you feel a little better. Are you willing to start him this week?
I am, because of the rushing floor. He's probably not going to have the same sort of production to Garrett Wilson because of the quarterback matchups there. Surtain just tends to lock people down. I think Wilson is still startable, but he's not ranked in the top 2 or 3 like he was last week for me. He's down at 15. I am expecting a downgrade. So if Fields can't adjust and find somebody else to throw to, or find Wilson when he is open, then he's going to struggle as a passer, but he does have that rushing floor that we see, 50 yards, and then might have a touchdown. And that might be enough to get you through. I've got him at QB 14 this week.
Worth noting, I have Fields as one of my big sits of the week because the Broncos have allowed 15 rushing yards to quarterbacks, not per game, on the season. They do not let quarterbacks scramble. They faced some who are capable of that, and they just haven't done it. And obviously, when you have one good receiving weapon in Garrett Wilson and Pat Surtain's on the opposite side of the field, that's not great either. So I'm trying to avoid Fields if I can. I would start all the guys we talked about above over Fields. And I think you said per your rankings, he's 14, so you would as well.
I
big.
would, and I wanted to look and see the rushing quarterbacks that he has played, and you're right. Daniel Jones, 2 rushing yards. Justin Herbert, 6 rushing yards. Jake Browning, who can run, 4 rushing yards. Jalen Hurts, 3 rushing yards. So whatever they got in the water right now, that's a little that maybe take the Fields under. What's his
I
over
have to
under
assume
for
it's
his?
decent because he's Justin Fields.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and like this is a very smart way to play defense. I don't know how exactly they're doing it, but quarterbacks that can run are hurting. They're like it's the way the NFL works now, and it hurts. So if you can figure out how to do this to those kinds of guys, it helps a lot. So I would sit Fields. If you find that number, let us know. And
I'm looking it up right now.
all right. At the running back position, the good matchups that are fringe startable, I've got a look at Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who gets the Bears and finally took over the backfield last week. Bears are 28th in AFPA. And then Tyler Algier. Now, I know everybody thinks of him as primarily an attrition back that you're just leaving on the bench, but he gets a lot of work, and the Bills are 24th in AFPA. It's the one place you can really beat them. Do you have I'm assuming you're starting JCM. I'd be curious how high. And then Tyler Algier, are you willing to put him in lineups?
Absolutely starting JCM. This looks like it's happening. Like we did get a report before last week that they were happy with their committee, but they felt like JCM was the player most capable of being the lead back. And then we immediately saw it. I think he handled 16 of the 23 backfield touches, went off.
Sounds right.
Like there's no reason not to expect him to, get 15 plus touches in an amazing matchup against the Bears. 171, I think, rushing or combined yards, 150 something, I think, rushing yards allowed to running backs.
Yeesh.
So yeah, you're starting JCM, get him in your lineups. I am also looking at the more on his rushing yards. I think it was set at 61 and a half, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it's gone up since I've been spouting off about it on podcasts. Algier, more of a RB3 flex type. You do get maybe 10 or 12 touches out of him. Some of that I think will be game script dependent. It worries me. It's like the Montgomery thing, but he's like a poor man's Montgomery. It worries me if the Bills jump out here and they've got Bijan out there for all the passing stuff, and Algier is not getting his usual rushing workload. I feel better about him when Atlanta is expected to be a neutral or positive game script. So he's a little bit worrisome for me, but there is some room to run against the Bills.
Worth noting, the Bills on the road are only favored by 4.5. So the game script might be a little better than you'd initially imagine. If so, I agreed with John that helps boost Tyler Algier a lot. On the bad side, we already talked about Derrick Henry and where you'd have him, so we can move over that. But the Rams are 4th in AFPA, just something to remember there. Jaylen Warren, who should be back, gets that Browns defense that we have hit on multiple times this year. They're 3rd in AFPA and just killing your typical run-of-the-mill running back. And the Saints running backs, who we also hit on, get the Patriots, who are interestingly 5th. And then Chase Brown. He gets the Packers, who are 1st in AFPA. Maybe there's hope with Joe Flacco. He does target the running back. But are you willing to start Chase Brown after what he's done and against this defense?
Well, in one league, I have to. It's a one running back league, and I went into the the draft with him and kind of ignored the position. So I've got a bunch of attrition guys that haven't panned out yet. I of course picked up DeMercado last week, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of worked. But I didn't start him. So yeah, I'm going to start Chase Brown, and I'm going to hope and pray that he can deliver 15 fantasy points and guide me to a win. Not a good matchup against the Packers, as you mentioned. The Packers rush defense especially has been really stingy. Jaylen Warren also in a stingy matchup against the Browns. He coming back. This is an interesting situation because Gainwell played really well in London, or was it Ireland? Overseas. He played really well.
Yes.
So I'm interested to see what this. I mean, I think Gainwell is kind of an interesting start, but if the matchup was better, I would probably write him up for sneaky starts because he's likely to see 12, 14 touches after last week's game. So I am interested to see this split. The Warren, ceiling sort of worries me with the way Gainwell played. So that's another aspect of that one that I'm not really crazy about. Yeah, I mean the Saints. We're getting into a timeshare status here. Kamara is at 28. I've got Kendra Miller at 40. I would say usually those two are not that close, but Miller's moving on up into the penthouse. Maybe if there's an injury, but I think right now we're moving into timeshare territory, and so that makes Kamara a little bit dicey.
Yep. Alrighty. At the wide receiver position, just a couple worth noting here. The Packers group get the Bengals. We talked about Jordan Love earlier. They are 27th in AFPA. The big question there, of course, is if it is someone, who is it? Or if it's multiple someones, which ones are they? Because good gracious, is it hard to figure out. And then the Saints wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed had a huge play last week that made him interesting. Chris Olave has been getting targets. They get the Patriots, who are interestingly 26th in AFPA. Are you willing to start guys from these teams? And if so, who are they?
Well, I think Romeo Doubs is worth a look. I've got him at 27 this week, and I do worry a bit that this is the week where Matthew Golden, off the bye, we see rookies sometimes take off. They get him going. He does have some air yards, and he has that speed to go deep. And the thing I like about Doubs, and he had 6 for 58 and 3 touchdowns, if you forgot, against the Cowboys on 8 targets. He doesn't have a high target floor. He only had 2 targets the week before against Cleveland, but that was a much worse matchup. He had a touchdown against Washington that I saw in person. So he's got 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. That's why I like Romeo Doubs, because Jordan Love looks his way at the goal line. He does also get some, stuff in between the 20s, but he's really good in contested catch. He's a pretty good route runner. He's improving, and he's able to shed coverage in tight spots and then make the contested catch. And that's why he's getting these red zone targets. So if it's not like Tucker Kraft getting it, then it's Doubs. And, 29 points, 29.8 points PPR against Dallas. And he did have the 11.8 game against Washington. I think he's a wide receiver 3 this week. Golden is more of a, cross your fingers, you're down bad and you have a good matchup and you're hoping for that rookie bump. And then for New Orleans, you want to know, I think with Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, they're not confident starts, but Spencer Rattler is delivering way better. It's not good, but it's way better than what I was expecting in terms of the passing game. He's supporting a couple of fantasy receivers each week. It might be Juwan Johnson, it might be Olave, it might be Shaheed. It's not all 3 usually, but it was great to see Shaheed. I think he's outscored. He's wide receiver 21 on the year now after a big game last week. Olave has been heavily targeted. I don't think he's got the touchdown upside or the deep ball upside necessarily, but he's a good PPR guy. So I'm looking at those guys as wide receiver 3 types.
On the bad side, I had Chris Godwin in here, but he is now officially ruled out as a note. So the other Tampa Bay wide receivers we talked about don't have a great matchup, but we talked about them. We have not talked about the Bills wide receiver group, who get the Falcons, who are 5th in AFPA, and are another group that's a little confusing to figure out. Somewhat similar to Green Bay, almost, it feels like. Do you have any confidence in Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, anybody there?
I would say like Shakir does give me some confidence. He has really been consistent the last few weeks and seems to be reestablishing himself as the number 1 receiver there for Buffalo. Like he had a good year last year and his receiving distributions were really quite high. He hasn't even matched those yet. Keon Coleman's been a little bit spotty. He did have the good camp. I think he had a really good week 1, but not a whole lot since then. I think maybe he caught a touchdown last week, if I remember correctly. I look at him like wide receiver 4, him as a wide receiver 4 type. I look at Shakir as like a wide receiver 3 type, just as, at 31 this week with Shakir as Josh Allen's top target, most trusted target. Coleman's down at 39. So he's more of a wide receiver 4.
Word. All righty. Tight ends. We will close it out here. On the good side, I have Tucker Kraft in here just to point out the Bengals are 31st in AFPA against tight ends. Obviously, you're starting Tucker Kraft in a redraft league if you have him, but just worth noting if you're playing DFS or something like that, this could be a huge game for Tucker Kraft, who's been somewhat inconsistent but huge when he goes off. A little more fringy, worth asking you about, are the Browns, who obviously there's two of, which makes it a little more complicated, between David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie. Both of them were heavily targeted by Dylan Gabriel in his first start last week. They get the Steelers, who are 28th in AFPA. And then Jake Tungus, who you mentioned briefly earlier, gets the Buccaneers, who are 29th. Are any of the Browns and Tungus strong starts for you this week?
Yes. David Njoku, I think 6 for 67 or something like that, and a touchdown last week, turned out to be the top target for Dylan Gabriel. I did not start him in Scott Fishbowl, and I partly blame you because you are such a Taysom Hill truther.
True.
And I picked up Taysom Hill, and I felt like, let's just run him out there. It'll be fun. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe he'll
did the same.
go off. Maybe he'll go off for like 50, 60 Scott Fishbowl points, and I'll look like a genius. Instead, I look like an idiot with Taysom Hill in my lineup and David Njoku scoring 32 on my bench.
Oh no!
I lost by 35, so I wouldn't have won the game, but I would have scored a lot more points.
Okay.
I don't really blame you. It's my team. And I have to take ownership over my roster decisions. It was stupid. I should have started Njoku. He seems to be, along with Fannin, I think a key component here with this offense going forward. I mean, Jerry Jeudy is not producing. Dylan Gabriel seems to be happy to target the tight ends, and he's got two good ones. Maybe a little bit of Isaiah Bond, but this seems to be a very tight end centric passing attack. It's only one game. So just exercise caution. But I have Njoku at 28, or I'm sorry, the Steelers are 28th in just fantasy points allowed at the tight end position. So I have Njoku at 12. I've got Fannin down at 19. It just didn't seem like he was as favorite of a target. So yeah, I think an Njoku low end tight end one. Tongas, I had to start last week, and he scored 20 points in my FFPC team with that I co-own with Connor Allen. So that was nice. We still lost, but it was nice getting 20.5 or something from Tongas. He's a pretty strong start, especially if Juwan Jennings sits. If Jennings is back with Bourne, then you start to worry a little bit about Tongas potentially getting some targets pulled from him. Tucker Kraft locked into lineups. He's my tight end 2 this week.
I wanted to go check on the Vikings AFPA against tight ends to see if that would give any extra info on the Browns breakout. They are 8th worst, or 8th, depends on how you look at it. They are bad against tight ends. That includes that game, which skews that a little bit, but just worth noting, maybe don't freak out about how good these guys are. Wait a game or two, but I do agree they are startable in a really good, this is a much better matchup even than the Vikings. So I think you can roll them out again this week, and we'll see how things go. On the bad side, Sam Laporta gets the Chiefs. They are 3rd in AFPA. Sam Laporta has been very inconsistent this year. In fact, that's almost too nice. He's been bad this year, except for really one game. Dalton Kincaid, who has been much, much better than that, gets the Falcons, who are 2nd. I imagine you're still starting him. Darren Waller, the rap career, somehow revitalized his NFL career. He's been amazing. 3 touchdowns in 2 games. He is facing the Chargers, who are 5th. So we'll see if there's some fallback there. But he's one of only really like 2 reliable targets right now, it would seem. And then Kyle Pitts, who has been kind of sneaky decent this year, gets the Bills, who are 1st in AFPA. They have been a terrible, terrible matchup for this position. On specifically Waller and Pitts, who are more fringy, I'm curious if you're still willing to roll them out there. And then on Laporta, I'm going to ask you straight up if you're okay starting Sam Laporta, or like what streaming guys would you put over him?
I think with Laporta, I would start him because I think this looks like a game that the Lions might trail in. The Chiefs are playing pretty well. Patrick Mahomes is rolling, and if they jump out to a lead and the Lions can't go as run heavy as they might like to on the road, then we've got 35, 38 pass attempts instead of 28. Then now you have more targets available for somebody like Laporta, and I think he's good enough to score against any team if he's getting enough targets. Kincaid, you're starting. He's been playing really, really well. Waller, I've got at 9. I've got Pitts at 10, and it's making me a little uncomfortable, and I'm really annoyed that I looked at it yesterday, and I was thinking, God, should I go Goddard over Pitts? And I didn't.
Ooh.
I went Pitts over Goddard, and I hope there is not a 4for4 subscriber that looked at that and followed it and is mad at me because I'm mad at myself. He has been pretty good, Kyle Pitts. But I'm looking at him. I'm looking at Njoku. I'm looking at Otten. And I'm kind of wondering, like, what would I do given the matchup against Buffalo being first? And this is where we're starting to trust. We've got more data. We're starting to trust AFPA a bit more. Is this true, and is this a really bad matchup for Pitts? It might pull the trigger on Njoku or Otten. It's tough.
I believe I would know your question if Jennings is out, but if Jennings is in, does Tungus get over Kyle Pitts for you?
If Jennings is out, that's how I have the rankings and projections right now. So I've got him at tight end 15. Now that might be a bit low. I think I might want to move him up ahead of Zach Ertz because Ertz has been kind of fading a bit. Chicago's 9th against the tight end position, and Tungus is kind of surging. He looks pretty good, but I wouldn't have him over Pitts, but I wouldn't talk you out of it either.
Okay. I don't know if that helps much because it seemed a little.
Well, I want listen, like every fantasy manager has their own thought process, and if they're like, I don't want to start to Kyle Pitts in this, somebody might trust AFPA more. I'm not one to say don't trust it or do trust it more than what you do. If when guys when it's that close, and if you're like, oh, I really want to start Tungus, then go start Tungus. Like it's your fantasy team. We're probably talking about half a point projection difference. It's not like high. It's not like I'm asking you, or you're asking me, should I start Tungus over Tucker Kraft? Mm-hmm. I would talk you out of that. Yeah. Or McBride or Tyler Warren. But Pitts, yeah, go ahead and do it. Go for it.
Yeah, especially the tight end position. This tier of guys is more or less all the same. So I agree. Go with what you feel best about. All right, let's get to some questions. There's a decent number of them, so we'll try to be somewhat quick, but there's some good ones. Samuel Burks, one of our most reliable question askers. In your thoughts, does Matthew Golden have a big improvement after the bye week? You touched on this briefly. And is he more valuable than Josh Downs, who I could pick up and use as a keeper in next season's draft? But I don't think that matters too much.
I'm looking at my rest of season. I'm pretty sure I have. Yeah, I've got Golden. Make sure I've got it. Yeah, I've got Golden at 48 and Downs at 53 right now, and I am close. I'm expecting improvement from Golden, but we have some different things happening now because Christian Watson is back at practice. I don't know that he's going to play this week or anything, but he looks like he might be playing soon, and could be dicey for Matthew Golden snaps. However, we have seen this time and time again after a bye. Rookie, like guys that are not so involved before the bye, and he did start to show some, and they're just missing on some deep balls. He's had a couple of good games. He was good against Cleveland. I think he had a pretty decent line against Dallas. So definitely would hold him over Downs right now. I'm not like holding my breath, waiting for Josh Downs to really emerge there. It really does seem like Daniel Jones likes Pittman. They've got Tyler Warren. And I want to give a hat tip, and I just remembered it. Pat Fitzmaurice came on the podcast, and we were talking, I think, either tight ends or receivers, and he was fading Downs due to the short area dominance that Tyler Warren was going to show. And so hat tip to him, because Downs is a reception perception favorite. We know he's talented. He's also been kind of limited with his snaps in these games where Alec Pierce is healthy, and Alec Pierce is back at practice and looks like he's going to be out there. So he might be the fourth option in this passing game after Warren, Pittman, and Pierce. So I would not worry about Downs in this decision. I would say, okay, let's go with Golden and see, what happens over the next few weeks.
Yeah, worth noting here, it might be the case for a lot of people's rest of season rankings or rest of season projections, and especially if your rankings are based on rest of season projections, that Downs might be ahead of Matthew Golden. I would not roster Downs ahead of Golden based on that kind of perspective, though, because these are bench guys who, at best, you're putting in a bye-week flex type of role until something changes. And the upside for Matthew Golden is so much higher than Downs. We know what Downs is right now in this offense. Golden, I think, could be a wide receiver too if things went really, really well for him after the bye. So I like that. Matt Tate said, could Jackson Dart be this year's Bo Nix down the stretch? I will raise my hand and say absolutely yes.
I would think so. With the way he's running the ball, he's showing some really good competency passing. I mean, you'd like to have at least Darius Slayton out there running routes on the outside, but he's getting by with who he's got. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good comparison.
I would be somewhat curious. I was thinking this during the game when the Giants sideline was just going crazy and they seemed to have so much energy. I would be kind of curious to see if they would trade for a wide receiver to help Jackson Dart. Because obviously, until Dart came along, this team looked like complete garbage and you wouldn't be trading midseason for anything. But the way they're picking up, like they're 2-1 with him. They were almost 3-0 with him, except for a bunch of turnovers that ruined that game last week. If they go and add someone else, because right now he's playing with no one, he could be very, very good. Pareko says, just traded Kenneth Walker and RJ Harvey for Ashton Genty. Good trade, ? Also have Bucky and Rachaad White, plus Travion and Pollard. Yes.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I think you're getting a pretty sizable upgrade from Kenneth Walker, who is a good player, but he's in a timeshare with Zach Charbonnet. Is not getting like the goal line carries consistently. And then Harvey is fine, but he's behind J.K. Dobbins right now. And I don't see a change to that with the way that J.K. Dobbins is running. So you're trading a kind of an attrition part-time back and Walker with sort of a lead role, but not a bell cow role for a bell cow who's now coming on. I like that trade.
Massively agree. Matt Tate says, who is closer to last year's Bucky Irving? And I think this is primarily a breakout rookie who's a fantasy star down the stretch. Cam Scadaboo or Ja'Cory Bill Krosky Merritt? This, I think, is a really interesting question.
Why not both?
True.
I mean, I really think they both have that potential. I've got Scadaboo at 19. This is before last night. JCM at 20. I look at them. I look at like Quinshon Judkins, and I wonder, with his suspension, should he be lower? Kenneth Walker, should he be lower than where I have him? I mean, I think Scadaboo, obviously last night, is going to be moving on up. And I think JCM after last week and what I think he might do this week is moving on up too. I think both these guys, and this is, kind of funny because the first couple of weeks we were just down on all the rookie running backs were terrible.
Yes.
And then now we're getting into, we have Hampton, who was trending up before the injury. Judkins is looking great. Scadaboo is looking great. JCM is looking great. There's still some disappointments, but these guys are coming on, and you just be patient with the slow start because sometimes it happens. Oh, I wanted to mention the over-under for for Fields, 41.5.
Oh,
so I mean, he's probably gone over that or more than that.
Yes, multiple times.
Well, probably every game, but now he's got the Broncos, who held Jalen Hurts to 2 yards.
He's held all the guys he's faced to like a third of that combined. So yeah, that's an interesting one. All right. With regard to this question, I agree with John. Why not both? I think Bill Krosky Merritt kind of fits the Irving mold a little bit more, which is I don't expect him to be a bell cow. Rachaad White was always involved, but he's so efficient. And if you look at any deeper metric on rushing, he has been amazing. So he doesn't need necessarily 20 carries like Cam Scadaboo might to really get going and have a strong game. That feels a little more Bucky-ish to me, but both these guys are great. And to John's point, This is why you don't overreact on slow rookie starts. This is why Matthew Golden has a lot of upside down the stretch. Like, this is just what we should expect. That everyone was freaking out about how bad they were through a couple weeks, and now we have several who are studs. So, yeah. Barb Westlake. This was during the Kendre Miller conversation, I believe. Would you pick up Kendre Miller and drop Kimani Vidal or Hassan Haskins? I absolutely would.
Yeah, I mean, if we knew who the RB1 was going to be for the next 4 weeks for the Chargers, I would probably say hold on to them, because you got to kind of play this game weekly, and you're not holding necessarily for long term. But we don't have any idea. Marion Hampton should return after 4 weeks, so whatever value they have is limited in terms of time. I think Kendre Miller has worked his way into a 10 to 12 touch role and would, I wouldn't say explode. I hate to use that word with Kendre Miller, like really blowing up, because he was a hype guy for quite a while and, hasn't delivered yet. But, if there's a Kamara injury, I mean, I think you're looking at 15 to 20 touches per game for Kendre in what's been a surprisingly mediocre, in a good way, offense for the Saints. So I think I would pick up Kendre and drop, unless you
Are
I mean,
0-5.
I mean, even if you need a start this week, though, I think you could argue that Kendre is right there with these two, and you might as well keep him for the long term.
Yeah, I would agree there massively. To the point about Kamara, he tends to get banged up at some point during just about every season, and obviously he's older than he's ever been. That is how age works. So I would take Kendre Miller easily here. I would probably take him even if we knew who would be the lead back between these two, because I don't think it's going to be a bell cow situation, and then Hampton will be back. Tyler Sperry asks, pick up, and this is not just a rankings question, so it's worth answering. Pick up Kendrick Bourne or Romeo Doubs. Both playable this week, probably, especially if Jawan Jennings is out. But who would you rather have on your bench or in your starting lineup?
This is tough because, we tend to overreact sometimes to Doubs touchdowns, and he's just not a big volume guy. But I've got him fairly high. I've got him at 42. He's there with like Khalil Shakir and Calvin Ridley right now. Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale might move up after last night's game. And then Bourne, I think, as much as I like him, he's on an alarm clock. Like this, he's going to turn into a pumpkin probably, assuming both Jennings and Pearsall come back, because I don't think you're looking at any sort of fantasy upside as the third receiver, fourth, fifth in the passing game after Kittle and McCaffrey as well. So I think for this week, you could certainly make a case for Kendrick Bourne over Doubs. I think I have him pretty close. I think it's like 27 for Doubs and 29 for Bourne. But I think longer term, Doubs' role is a little bit more established, even if it's not as big as we'd like it to be.
Agree. John Abruzzo says, hey, fellas, what we think of trading Mahomes and Breece Hall to receive Lamar, Dobbins, and Daniel Jones, who would start until Lamar is back. Current RBs are Genty and Breece. I like this a lot. I will open up the answer here by saying I think Patrick Mahomes' current fantasy position, which I think is probably top 5, is inflated falsely, because he has rushed for 50-plus yards and a touchdown in 3 of 5 games this year, led the team in rushing each of those games. That is not something I think we can rely on. Now, I know it's happened 3 times, so it seems maybe like it is reliable, but this team might go trade for a running back. There's a lot of chatter that might happen. They might finally figure out a situation with Rashard Smith or something where they get the ground game going outside of Mahomes. He has never been a 50 to 60 yard and a touchdown every week kind of rusher. I don't really see that maintaining rest of season. And outside of that, from a passing perspective, he has 1 game with 4 touchdown passes. The other 4 games, he has 1 in each. So I believe he is going to drop down to the back end of QB1 range, and Lamar Jackson will not. And when he is healthy, this is a huge upgrade. And Dobbins, to me, is pretty close to Breece Hall. So I would do it. But how do you feel, John?
I would not do it. I have
Okay.
Mahomes at QB2 rest of season, and you make a good case on the rushing yards because he is averaging 38 yards per game. But I think he's doing that because the running game is bad. Now you could make a case that they will trade, but right now I'm looking at the cards on the table. He's getting Rashee Rice back soon, who is their best receiver. He's got Xavier Worthy back. Hollywood Brown's playing pretty well. Tyquan Thornton's playing well, playing great. Best football of his career. Travis Kelce's having some games. They really can't run the ball very well. So we're getting 36 and a half pass attempts, 251 yards passing. We're not getting like vintage fantasy Mahomes, but when you add in these rushing touchdowns, that's why he's doing so well. I still think he's gonna run the ball because they can't run it with Pacheco or with Hunt very well. It's like 3 yards a carry. So, and then I don't, Lamar Jackson, I love him. He does have the one thing I looked at as you were talking is the schedule. I mean, Lamar Jackson has a lot of good matchups after the week 7 bye. So if he can come back and face Chicago, Miami, the Jets in week 12, Cincinnati in week 13, Pittsburgh in week 14, Cincinnati again in week 15, it could be a very nice run for Lamar Jackson.
Ooh.
But he is right now injured. And I don't know I don't know when or if the season's completely off the rails or how bad his injury is. Like, do they lose another couple games and then they're realizing that he can't, or he tries to come back and he, to save the season and he retweaks it and now he's out for another month? Like, I don't think I want to do that. And then we're also taking a downgrade, which you agree is a downgrade from Breece Hall to Dobbins. It's not a huge downgrade, but it is the downgrade. I think it's too close at quarterback to make that trade.
Okay, you also make a good case. So now I'm in a tough spot because it's a hamstring injury for Lamar, which means even when he does get healthy, that's concerning for a guy who's obviously we rely heavily on the rushing. And they are going to be 1-5 after this week. There is no way there's no snowball's chance in hell that they beat the Rams with the team that they've got right now. So they're going to be 1-5. That's scary. So I still think I lean there because I just don't believe this holds for Mahomes. And you have Daniel Jones if Lamar doesn't come back, who's been okay. But it's definitely closer than I initially felt. Good cases made from both sides, maybe. So make your choice based off that. We've got 2 more questions. Lex Plant Some Trees says, would you trade Debo and Charbonnet to get Drake London? Receivers are Jamar Chase, Debo, DJ Moore, Jennings, Hunter. PPR redraft lead. Yes. I would do this.
My initial reaction was yes. London I have at 10. Debo.
Rest of the season.
Yeah, rest of the season. Debo's 24. And that's like what's baked in there is McLaurin coming back. Now, if you're looking at McLaurin's injury and you're like, I don't know, it's like a quad injury. He was getting second opinions. Like, you could squint your eyes and see a scenario where he's not playing soon. And then Debo's the number 1 receiver for the Commanders. But I don't think that Charbonnet is enough to really make up the difference. If Walker was out for the year, sure. But with him in a part-time role, I don't think that. So the answer is yes, I would trade Debo and Charbonnet to get London.
Yeah.
That's what you said, right?
Yes. Something to note on Charbonnet is his numbers don't look bad, and you think he's being pretty good for fantasy because he's happened to score a touchdown in 3 or 4 games. But I don't think you're ever going to feel good about starting Zach Charbonnet. And if he doesn't happen to fall into the end zone, you're going to get absolutely screwed because he's not top 50 rushing yards in a game this year. He's not involved as a receiver. His yards per carry are terrible. I don't think you're ever going to feel great about putting him in a lineup. So he's just an attrition back. And I don't think that's enough of an upgrade. I would agree with you there. Last question. It's been a big show. Cruz Garcia says, just got offered Dowdle for Woody Marks. who was the biggest disappointment of week 5. 1-4 right now. Should I take it with Chuba being out?
I would say yes to this, and this is why I would say yes. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Chuba's got a calf injury. Calf injuries are tricky. They sometimes take a while to heal, and they sometimes will re-injure. Any soft tissue really will, but calf injuries especially. You need wins now. Waiting on Woody Marks to really take that job, I don't know that's going to happen because he had his big game, and then the next week they just basically were back into him playing second fiddle to Chubb. And you do have the small chance that Joe Mixon will come back, although I'm not holding out any hope really for that at all. I don't even have him in the rest of season rankings. So I would do this and try to get this win this week, in the next 2 weeks maybe. You may be left holding the bag and feel bad about this, but this is your move to try to save your season, and you're sort of gambling on this Hubbard thing turning into a longer deal thing, or Dowdle winning the job. Like if he's rushing for 200 yards last week, if he has another good game, there might be more. You might be getting like more touches than Woody Marks after Hubbard comes back, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The only way this really bites you is if Woody Marks like wins the job. But the last thing I heard on that was that he's not a big guy. They don't think he's durable, and that he's going to be a part-time player. They don't see him as a lead back bell cow type player. So you're probably not going to regret this trade because you are making a play to try to win this week.
I think that the record is the difference maker here. And I appreciate that Cruz put this in here, and I appreciate John's emphasis on that. If you were 4-1, I would not make this trade, and I will tell you why. But because you're 1-4 and you need the wins now, I think this is a trade worth making. The reason I say that is Woody Marks, John hit on it, did not get what we wanted last week. That was very largely because the Texans were shellacking the Ravens practice squad. And the week before that, they beat up on the Titans 26-0. But other than that, they had not been very good. They had played 3 competitive teams before that and lost all 3 games. Coming out of their bye, which they have this week, they get the Seahawks, 49ers, Broncos, Jaguars, who have been sneaky good, and then the Titans, and then a bunch more games that are very losable. I think there is a good chance that they are playing from behind much more often this year than they were the last 2 weeks, and that Woody Marks gets more snaps again and is usable and has upside, a lot of upside. And Dowdle, assuming that Hubbard gets healthy, loses a lot of that. So in a vacuum or in a 4-1 team, I think I would go with the upside of Woody Marks. But 100% like John said, because of the record you're at and the fact you need a win, I would definitely go with Dowdle. And I think a lot of what John said about the fact that he could just keep this job, even with Hubbard back, or keep significant snaps and carries at least, is true and makes this attractive. Okay. Good.
One more
gracious.
question. One more question.
Ooh.
I was going to quickly say yes. I would make this trade. I would get ETN and Brian Thomas Jr., who's showing signs of life. You're headed to 2-4, hopefully. Jacobs is better than ETN and has more value, but it's not worth the upside of BTJ. So making this trade, I think, would be a wise one. The only upside too with keeping Jacobs is that he's past his bye now, but you got to have some good with some bad. Anyway, I just wanted to.
Yeah, good call out. Worth noting on Brian Thomas Jr., he has fixed his catch rate these last couple games after a horrid start to the season. So there is hope for him. All right. We will close it out there. Long show. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Good luck in week 6. Good luck the rest of the season. See you in AMAs and articles. Check out all of John's stuff, of course, and on social media. Adios.